Very good. Here we are. It is almost time to greet Callum for tea. So we are going to wait for him to join us. He's coming from a long way away, but I'm sure they have very good internet where he is. I've just made my tea. I hope all of you have too, and that you're sitting comfortably, as Mother used to say. Are you sitting comfortably? We will wait for Callum. All right. Technology. I'll make my tea while we're waiting. Mr. Innes.
I'm here.
How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Why
How are you?
Why have you got such a nice tan?
It's the Oslo weather.
You should be ashamed of yourself. You look
Yeah, I
terribly
know.
healthy.
It's terrible. It's terrible. It's just being on my bicycle all day.
Oh, well, there's another story. Very nice to see you. Thank you for joining us for tea. I suspect that you're drinking something a little stronger.
It looks like tea.
Does it begin with S and end in H?
No.
Oh,
No.
so you're drinking scotch out of a teacup.
Out of a mug, in your honour.
Good for you. So the first thing we need to do is establish where you are, because unbeknownst to those who haven't been following things attentively, you're not in Scotland, are you?
No, I haven't been in Scotland since February. The idea was, we set up a studio here in Oslo, and the idea was to go back and forward every 2 or 3 weeks to Edinburgh, Oslo, work in both. But I was here when lockdown happened and they shut the borders, and I've been in Oslo ever since.
So you can't actually physically go back?
Not this now, no. I mean, if I left, now I think I could go back, but I wouldn't get back into Norway.
Would you have to quarantine?
Not if I go back to Britain, I don't think. But I think the government, when they announce something today, they keep changing their mind. I wouldn't have to quarantine from Norway, no. But if I came back into Norway, I'd probably have to quarantine from Britain.
Right.
So
yeah,
it's been kind of fortuitous, because I just set up a studio here. So, you know, I've enjoyed it now for the last 4 months.
And has that occasioned a shift in the work, setting up a studio, being in a different place?
I think inevitably when you set up a new studio, it always changes the work to somewhat, to some degree. But actually just starting to feel comfortable in the studio now, you know, it takes a while to settle into a studio. It's a very different studio from the studio in Edinburgh. It's a bit more intimate, a bit smaller. The light is very different, so it's taken me a while, but I've actually enjoyed it a great deal.
When you started working in the new space, did you go straight to painting, or did you start off with smaller works on paper, or what was your MO?
I went straight to painting. I had the studio in Edinburgh sent across a van with about 30 canvases prepared. And it just followed after Christmas, and we had spent a great deal of time setting up the studio. I hadn't really worked for about a month and a half. So I just started working.
Because in Edinburgh, you've got it's quite a nice, very comfortable and sort of logical setup for how the canvases, the stretchers are prepared, the canvases are prepared, the process they go through before they come into the painting space. And you haven't got any of that backup where you are.
I haven't got any backup. I haven't got any assistance. I have Christine to help me now and again move something. And I've been doing things.
I hope you're paying a union rate.
I am. It's very expensive here in Norway, I can assure you. I mean, she has a studio upstairs, so we're kind of there together, which is quite good. And also very different for me. And I've been doing things like preparing canvases, which I haven't done for 30 years. And
is that a nightmare?
It's a pain in the ass, to be honest, but it's my fingernails are white all the time.
That's very fashionable.
And it's you know, I miss my assistants, but I've actually enjoyed the time on my own, and it's, you know, it's quite reflective. You know, you kind of when you go to a studio every day, you read things in the newspapers, you have this process of going to start work. And in Oslo, I go there, have my coffee on my own, look at the news, and then start, and it's very different. I don't have anybody to say, could you do this, could you do that? I've got to do it myself.
But you don't think there's any marked difference in the work that's being produced?
Well, I think now, the last week, it started to change quite a bit. I think inevitably, artists make jumps or move their work. I always move my work in small increments. And at the very beginning of lockdown, it was February, and the studio was quite high. It's on the 7th floor of a tower block, which is really about the 10th floor because there's double floors. And I look over the fjord. And I spent the evenings looking at sunsets, which I can't do in Edinburgh. The studio's got a glass roof, it's frosted, and it changed all day. So in a way, the colour has come into the work. I've been using a quinceañerine gold. It doesn't really reflect the sunset, but it's more of a comment on it.
Yeah, that's super.
And then today I was making watercolours, and there was clouds coming across the fjord. It was grey. I was thinking about the Norwegian artist Dahl, and quite beautiful. So the light is quite different.
So it's more you are sort of absorbing it.
I'm absorbing. I have to absorb it because I'm here.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was going to ask you, because I do think there's a huge jump cut that's occurred in the work that started to be made in Norway, and that is this new colour. Well, new to me anyway. I haven't seen you using it in this way before, and it's performing in quite a particular way. But I don't know quite how you pronounce this, but it's like quinacridone gold.
Quinacridone.
Quinacridone. Okay.
Yeah. Highly poisonous.
Huh?
Highly poisonous.
Oh, great.
Excellent. Yeah. I have to make sure I don't eat it.
But have you used it before? Because it suddenly appeared, and the paintings that you're making with it are really beautiful.
I haven't used it before, and but colours tend to stick around me for a while. And for many years I used violet, and then I changed it, and it became a blue. And you get attached to colours, and I'll push it as far as I can push it. But it's I've actually been making watercolours, a lot of watercolours, and I've been enjoying the watercolours, and they're quite different again.
It's a very different colour for you, this gold colour.
Maybe a bit flash. I don't know. I like it. It's not dark, and everything for a while was quite dark, and
we had somebody
operate in the space beyond.
Right. We had somebody send us. I think in a way you've already started addressing this, but somebody sent us. I'm going to mangle the exact question that they wanted us to ask you, but they were referring to a beautiful blue-black painting. I don't know if you remember the exact painting. I should have given you the reference before we started. But it's a very, very beautiful blue-black painting that we showed at the Armory last year in 2019.
It's a solid blue.
Yeah, and it sort of almost flips back and forth, the blue and the black.
Yeah. And
they were asking a question about how does the progression of working with colours occur in the work? You've said it's incremental in small increments over a period of time.
Colours stick around me for a while, and I go back and forward. With that blue-black painting you're talking about, the blue was particularly blue and very violet. And I let the blue dry, and then I put a black across it. I think it was a matte black, if I'm remembering the painting correctly.
Yeah.
And you take it through it, and then you disturb the blue. And so all my colours are disturbed. They're all kind of what appears to be a pure colour has actually had a black over it or had another colour over it. And what you won't realise about the quinceañerine paintings is that the last coat is actually a gold green goes over the painting and a violet. And that just lightens up the painting. It activates the colour. So if you think about Turner's watercolours and he's painting a sky and you have blue and yellow, it activates. And it's something I've kind of worked out with watercolor, working with watercolor, how you activate an oil color, actually, but through turpentine and through a pigment.
So what looks like a single color is actually many layers of color.
It's many layers of color. I mean, in these quinacridone paintings, you have the quinacridone goes on first, then a lamp black possibly goes across it, then it comes off, then it goes on again, and then after that, a transparent violet or a sap green, and that just highlights the color, and it activates it for me. Otherwise, it would do nothing. It would be like your Pantone mug there.
Flat orange.
Yeah.
It's Pantone 1505.
Yeah, something like that.
So you've mentioned Turner, and I've often thought about when I was a museum curator, I was lucky enough to do a Turner watercolors exhibition, and I was also lucky enough to work on a Constable watercolors exhibition, and they were extraordinary shows to work on, and I was always blown away by Constable's sort of pochard studies of clouds.
You've been blown away.
Which are very...
I missed that part. You went silent for a minute.
Constable's, his pochard studies of clouds,
Yeah.
which were made in a notebook, and then the notebooks were unbound.
Yeah.
They're very intimate, but he's running watercolor in lots of different layers over each other and working very quickly.
Yeah.
And they have just a wonderful sort of directness and intimacy to them.
I mean, the interesting thing about watercolor is you work in reverse all the time. You know, you're working in reverse. With oil paint, it's a positive thing. With watercolor, it's in reverse. I mean, I did a show in Zurich many years ago now at the paper cabinet in the museum. And Bernard Fibuchet asked me to do a show with watercolor, and I kind of blithely said, yeah, I'll do a show with watercolor. That's no problem. I'd never made a watercolor in my life. And it's really the only time, about 2 months before the show, I nearly cancelled and said, look, I can't work this out. I can't work out the format of the paper, can't work out what I'm doing. And then something clicked. And ever since then, it's something I really enjoy. I mean, today I was, as I said earlier, I was working with watercolor, and I was just making grey and black ones. And each one changed. And, you know, I don't like referring to landscape in the work, but every time I looked out the window, the grey was different. And I would add a bit of violet to the black, or, you know. So I'm a tamperer, I'm a fiddler, as I am this now, and I fiddle with paint.
I mean, it is interesting that you talk about looking out at the sunset in Oslo, because obviously the quality of light there is very, very different to Scotland. And I remember when we were working on making the building in upstate New York, and we asked you to come and spend some time with us and make a response to the building. Your response was that you sat and watched the sunsets for a long period of time, and then you produced a series of watercolors that almost sort of appeared to synthesize what you'd seen, but they weren't at all literal. They were almost as if you'd absorbed them. So is it very much a process of looking and taking your time and then?
I mean, I'd often say, you know, if I go back to Edinburgh, you know, if you talk about a white painting, a resonance painting, it's not about the white painting, it's about the horizon line and the sky and all the colors that reflect in it. And it's, yeah, I mean, I'm not overtly political, although I'm political. And, you know, the only thing I can put into my work is my references and my thoughts and my memories and the things I look at. And, you know, that's what ties it down for me. After that, it goes somewhere else. That
I mean, a couple of references so far have both been to landscape painters.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I think about the paintings, I think about them being split horizontally much more than, split vertically much more than, split vertically much more than horizontally. Of course, when you create them, they have a horizon in them. But I mean, do you think that your reference is to there is a sort of underlying reference to the tradition of landscape painting in Great Britain?
Not really, no. I mean, it's with oil paintings, I tend to put the paint on horizontally, then I break it with a vertical, which is always in the landscape. And that's kind of obvious to me, that you always break the, the horizontal with the vertical. And that to me gives it space. And then you start to introduce space into the painting. As I say, I like Turner, and I look at a few landscape artists. It's not, I'm not referencing them. I maybe reference the color or whatever, but and I hate the idea of titling a painting and calling it, Sea Cliff Beach or whatever. It's got nothing to do with that, but it's the memory of it in my head that makes the painting. So it's, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, no, totally. Let me ask you a question. Where does the imperative to be an artist come from for you? I mean, did you have any family members who were artists? Is there a tradition in the family?
I had an uncle.
We all have an uncle.
I had an uncle once. My father, God bless him, was given a job when he was 13 and wanted to be an architect and probably could have gone to art school. And he always supported me. But I had an uncle, my Uncle Archie, who sadly died late last year, was a tapestry weaver, and he worked at the Dovecot Studios in Edinburgh. And I grew up just along the road from the Dovecot Studios. So my Thursday afternoon job was going along to Dovecot and helping there, or helping warp up. Wasn't allowed to do anything. But I was surrounded by artists. And, you go to his flat in Stockbridge, his house in Stockbridge, and he'd always be in his studio. And he made great work at the time, and he was a very important master weaver, but an artist in his own right as well. And he worked with people like Liechtenstein and a few other people. And so I grew up in that environment, but that was the other side of the family. But, I grew up there. And, from the ages of 14, 15, that's all I wanted to do. That's all I was half good at. At school, it was the safest place to be. I was very fortunate. I went to it was a model school. You don't get them built in Britain anymore. It was a model EU school. And they had a specialist art department. They had a main studio and 5 studios off it. And the head of the department, Dick Lovell, an amazing man, gave me free rein. And he let me be in the studio when I wanted to be. I only had to leave the studio when he was belting someone, but that was about the only thing.
Not allowed to do that anymore, Callum.
You're not allowed to do that anymore. Callum, you'd leave the studio now. I need to deal with this boy. But it was a sanctuary, and I think I was very fortunate to have that opportunity at that time.
I had very much a sort of very similar experience at school before I left. That the art room or the art studio always felt where the kind of outsiders, the outliers, hung out. And you could kind of, the expectations were very different. Yeah. And, it was a bunch of kind of freaks and weirdos, basically, but something interesting was always happening. Yeah,
I mean, that was it totally, and it also avoided the general kind of war that was going on outside in the school at the same time. You could avoid it.
But this was in Edinburgh, not in Glasgow, so it wasn't literal war.
Oh, no, I mean, it was quite, kind of lived in Christophe and Stroke Carrick now. Nobody would know that, but yeah, you would have Forrester School that would come up for a meeting at the gates, so it's just like
war.
I used to carry a French horn to school, so I wasn't the kind of person.
Oh yeah, you were definitely marked out.
I was marked out straight away, so I get it.
You were talking about making watercolors, but of course, very early on when you moved, because you actually started as a figurative painter,
The only reason I wasn't a Glasgow boy, that I didn't live in Glasgow, because I showed with Stephen Campbell and Adrian Wisniewski and all these people in London,
Yeah.
a couple of shows. But, you know, I was in Aberdeen at college and I lived in Edinburgh, so I wasn't deemed a Glasgow boy, which was a blessing.
So where early on you talked about making watercolors. You did start as a figurative painter, but from quite early on you were making abstract works on paper, but they were not on watercolor. They were on a very special type of paper. Can you talk to us about dumpster diving in the 80s?
I was living in Amsterdam at the time, and I had a scholarship, and you know, didn't have very much money really, and I had cleaned out the figurative image, or I had cleaned out the paintings. I'd taken the figure away, just ended up with an oval. And you've got to start somewhere else again. And I still see, in some ways, my paintings as being inherently figurative, because they have to physically hit you in a physical and emotional way. But the key for me was finding a paper which was a very simple wrapping paper for metal. It was an oil-based paper. It was impregnated with oil. It was made to protect metal, to stop it rusting. And I worked out that I could paint an image on the paper. So I could still have this thing, I have to paint an image, then I could dissolve the image off. And really, for the first time, what happened was that I could paint an image, take the image off, and it became part of the paper. So suddenly the work had its own intrinsic history. And that's quite key in my work. You know, so for quite a few years, I would paint an image, dissolve it off, usually plant-based or organic in some way. And, or, you know, use a bit of material, Henry Tonking, you know, dissolve something, put a bit of material on it, take the image off. So you end up with something that exists in itself, without the artist's hand, which really is a white lie, because it is all about the hand, and it is all about the gesture. It is all about the emotion when you approach something. But I had to keep it in my head as a way forward. So I worked on this oil paper for quite a few years, and it's, you know, it was fantastic because you could paint something, dissolve it off, slight kind of alchemy in it. It would almost go to gold. You put olive green on, take it off, you go back into the paper, so you have layers. And that was very important. That's a very important step in my work.
So you're probably best known, most associated with two things, I think. One is this sort of I think sort of perhaps quite simple but very revolutionary idea that one can make and unmake the painting at the same time. And I would guess that that's related to the waxed paper paintings.
Yeah.
But the other one, of course, is the exposed paintings, where you've pushed that even further and sort of unmaking the painting at the same time. Can you remember the first time you made what would become to be known as an exposed painting? Was there a kind of eureka moment?
There was. Well, not eureka. I didn't kind of jump up and down in the studio and say, "Hey, I've solved this." It goes back to that watercolor show. Because beforehand I was making maybe split paintings and taking them off. But with the watercolor show in Zurich, I made a series of works on A2 paper, which was just a band of color, watercolor, then taken off. And really want to create space and to solve the problems of the paper in my head. How do you make a watercolor on a sheet of paper A2? How do you cover it? And it was a very, sounds simple, jump to take that motif and then transfer it into canvas. So I took a band across the canvas and then dissolved it off.
But that's quite rare, isn't it, that you can transfer a technique from paper to canvas that really works?
Well, it's maybe more the motif of actually the structure. So you had a top, bottom, and a side. You know, the active parts of my painting are not the bits I've touched. I mean, if you look at a large painting, if it's working, you know, often people who come to the studio will say, "How did you paint the white bit underneath?" The bit I haven't touched. Then I know the painting's spiraling and it has a space. And it has a fragility that maybe a human fragility, but it has a space within the painting. And really that motif from the watercolors in Zurich, I took into painting and then took it further again.
You know, one of the things that I probably, with regard to you, have been asked more over the last 25 years than anything, is people saying to me, can you get Callum to make a really big one? And, you know, trying to explain to them your process and how the process itself determines the scale of the paintings. I can make people glaze over quite quickly, but perhaps you can explain it to us in a way that people will remain switched on.
Well, if they remain switched on, I don't know. If you manufacture a painting, it becomes mannered. And I need to be able to stand on a canvas and go right across it with one stroke. Now, it might mean a bit of shuffling with my feet, but I need to be able to keep a constant stroke right across it. And I mean, about 2 meters 50 is about the max that I can do horizontally.
So there's a real physical limitation, which comes from the body.
It comes from the body, and it comes from my physical limitation, and you know, the length of my arm, and you know, do I really want to stand on a platform at that height and go straight across the canvas?
Well, I know that you have done that and fallen backwards off it on one occasion.
That was because of a French fucking photographer. Yeah, he took the. Gotti, you're a very nice person. I love you a great deal. He's such a sympathetic guy, and I love him in the studio. And he is, he's very quiet round about you. And I was on a platform, and he was filming me, and he took the box from under the platform that I stepped on to the platform away, and I just stepped off.
We shouldn't talk about that, should we?
No, don't talk about it. Yeah.
All right, so I have a couple of questions for you. I mean, we've learned a lot about what you're up to at the moment, your process, and I don't want this to be all completely serious the whole way through, because I know from spending a lot of time together that you're actually an extremely funny guy. So one question we got, and I think I know what this means, but I'm sure you will know what it means, is are you a 5-yard or an 8-yard man?
8-yard.
Oh, perfect. You knew what it meant.
I know what it meant.
So explain what the hell that means, would you?
It's the traditional length of a kilt.
Ah, okay.
And if you're a 5-yard man, you're a cheapskate. You're not buying a full kilt. But actually, the 8 yards is too hot to wear.
Well, the other question, of course, is what's underneath the kilt?
Oh, come on. Yeah, I've stayed often enough with you, you know.
I don't think I've only ever seen you in a kilt once, actually.
No, I do have a kilt.
Is there an Innis Tartan?
Yeah, of course there is.
It's a very Scottish name. There must be an Innis Tartan.
I mean, there's an Innis Tartan which is actually very bright, very orange.
That's like where these paintings are coming from.
Not like the Dewar tartans that you get. And and there was once at a wedding of Gary Waterston's, a good friend, in a hotel, and I was wearing my kilt. And these Americans were there, and they said, "Hey, you must be a chieftain. Your kilt's different."
It's a good job you weren't wearing a feather headdress as well.
Well, I got them to buy me a drink. It was okay. It was fine. But no, there is an Innis clan, and it's from Morayshire.
There's a very famous Scottish painter, 19th century, C.J. Innis, or 18th century?
Yeah, C.J.
Who's a landscape, very good landscape painter.
Yeah.
Any relation?
They all were these days.
Yeah. Any relation?
No relation at all. No.
Okay. What have you in this time of being self-isolated? I know you like to cook a lot. What have you been cooking?
A lot of cod. I'm in Norway.
So white wine has been involved.
No, I mean, I was never a great cook, and I've started to really enjoy cooking. So it's I've just been going through recipe books, mainly ottolenghi. It's simple, it's good, it's fresh. All right, it's actually like mixing paint to me. I come home in the evening, and I enjoy it. It's cathartic. It relaxes me.
And what have you been drinking in this period? What's
Very
your
expensive
favourite?
Norwegian wine.
Oh, good Lord. What's your favourite tipple of the moment?
No, it's, you know what I drink, Sean. I drink red wine and whiskey, and some habits don't stop, so it's continued.
So you've been able to find an off license in
They don't.
in
Well, they
Oslo?
have Vinopals here, which are only open on a Saturday from 10 till 3, and if you don't buy your wine, you're screwed for Sunday. So it's but they actually have very good wines because it's such a monopoly. They can buy anything they want, and so
Right.
you can get great wines.
If you weren't an artist, what would you be?
Reminds me, I came to New York quite a few years ago with my son Lachlan, and we spent a week in New York, and we went around the galleries, we went to a car show and various other things, and Lachlan said to me at the end of it, he said, "Dad, you should have been a dealer. They get 50% of everyone." So, and you know, I just
Only the good ones.
so it's only the good ones, exactly. But I don't know what I've been. I haven't got a clue. But
I'm not going to
that's
ask
stuck
any
in
more
my head.
questions after that.
That's stuck in my head.
If you were good for Lachlan, why is he doing what he does instead of being a dealer if he's so bloody clever?
Yeah, because he wants to be an artist. He's fine.
You see?
Yeah, he wants to be an artist, and it's good. And Isabella in New York wants to be an artist, and you know, with fashion or film and photography, and you know, they're making their way, which is great.
Thank God Stella's just a great horsewoman. And
That she's fantastic. You know, she knows what she wants to do.
so you're on a desert island. You've got one piece of music you can listen to and one last meal. What would they be?
Oh God, I've been listening a lot to Jacques Brel just now. Jacques Brel. So,
Who?
French composer from the 60s, Jacques Brel. Or maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. You'd have to ask Laurent if I'm pronouncing it wrong.
Jack Brel? No.
Jacques Brel, sorry, Brel. And so the style, that's been quite important. I listen to music all the time in the studio, so I wouldn't know quite where to pin it down.
All right, last meal.
Oh God, I'm actually missing a steak, pie, and chips just now because I can't get it. Here.
Not haggis pie.
Not haggis, no, a steak, pie, and chips. You know,
But from a proper chip shop or from a fancy restaurant?
no, just Bowers, the butchers in Edinburgh, steak pie and homemade chips.
I'm going to ring them up and ask them to sponsor this show from now on because they got a shout out.
It's you know, it's that comfort food that you have now and again, and you have it and you think, Christ, why did I want that? Because it's stodgy. But when you want it, you really want it.
Yeah.
And no, I kind of miss that.
It's like every so often
It's not fancy. It's just basic.
Every so often I get a craving for fish and chips out of newspaper with good old fashioned vinegar.
Well, it's like fish and chips. You get the craving for it. You want it. It smells great. You eat it, and then you regret it.
Yeah. Then you go, why did I even consider doing that to myself?
It's the same. It's the same thing with steak pie. But that's.
We talked about Turner and Constable a little bit. What contemporary artists are you interested in? Are you looking at?
You know as well as I do that I buy a lot of. You know, I collect work. Behind me,
You said it, so I'm allowed to follow up on that. But you actually are an inveterate collector.
Yeah, I mean, I love collecting. I mean, it's. I started very young. You know, I started many years ago when I was 15. I bought my parents. I can remember going into a gallery and this gallerist following me around, this boy in this uniform, what do you want? And I ended up buying a glass vase. And I worked in a shoe shop at the time, and I had to go in 5 times and pay it off. But it's, I've always collected ever since that point. And actually, yeah, if I sell something, I like to buy something. That sounds a wee bit pompous, but.
You haven't answered the question though. Who are you looking at the moment?
Fernanda Gomes.
Okay, and who was the last artist you bought?
Fernanda Gomes.
During this period or before?
Not during this period. I haven't bought anything during this period.
Right.
I don't think. Have I? No, I haven't got anything to say.
You're actually somebody who I mean, there are lots of different types of artists, of course, and there are artists who really should never go to an art fair, and there are artists who can go to art fairs and have a good time. And you like to go to art fairs and you like to look. Have you been looking at the virtual fairs during this period when the real fairs have been cancelled?
Yeah, I kind of had a look at Basel and Freeze.
How did you find that as an experience?
Tedious, boring.
Tell us what you really think.
Tedious, boring. It's not a substitute for looking at anything in life. You don't get that hit. You don't get that emotional response. I mean, my work doesn't really work in a virtual way anyway.
It's true, actually. I mean,
it's not about my work. It's I need to see something before I buy it. I need to feel for it.
But we always say to people who are interested in your work, look, we'll send you an image, but you really have to come and stand in front of the painting.
Yeah,
and there is no substitute for that with a lot of artists, of course, but with you in particular, it's very true.
I just find these art fairs, I mean, the COVID thing has been awful for many people in many ways. And I don't really want to talk about that, but maybe in a bizarre way, it's good for the art world, because maybe we get rid of all these fucking fairs. Sorry, excuse the language. Because the fairs have just become a place where people go along, they like to be seen, they like to buy, and it's not really about the art. The best experiences are making an exhibition and viewing an exhibition or seeing an exhibition and experiencing that. And, the fairs have just taken over in many ways. I mean, you of all people, and, you make great exhibitions, you curate your shows. And you create your booths as well. And I love going to Basel because you see great things at Basel. You see 20th century and you see contemporary. But it's too many fairs. And, the art world's in danger of killing itself. It's much better to have a discussion and a dialogue with a collector in an exhibition. But that's my personal
I couldn't agree more. Now, there's another topic that I know you know a very great deal about. And I'm going to give you one choice. You can't have 6 choices here, okay? But you are an inveterate car person.
Yeah.
If you could buy one car, what would it be? Your dream car?
Mercedes SL. They're beautiful. But the one with the top up. The one that does that. I know Isabella, my daughter, would love to drive it.
But a classic one, the 180 SL, a classic one.
A classic 180 SL, yeah.
From the 50s or
the 60s, early 60s, late 50s. I had one from 62, which I had to move on, but it's.
We're just looking up on Amazon now. We're going to get one delivered to you.
Thank you. That's very generous. You get a couple of my paintings on Amazon as well, I believe. But it's, there's something, and I think it's something that's very time limited, because I don't think it's maybe proper anymore that we drive around in gas guzzlers or old cars that stink. But I remember when I got the SL quite a few years ago now, I was so happy I got it. But if I let it stop, I couldn't start it. I was in.
Sounds like a lawnmower.
Yeah, it was a bit like a lawnmower. And I was in Dunbar, which is a coastal town in East Lothian, Scotland. And I was parked outside an ice cream shop with all these people having ice cream, and they were all admiring the car. But eventually, somebody came out and said, "Could you please turn the engine off, because we're all getting sick." I mean, if I stopped it, it wouldn't start again. But no.
So puts it all in perspective, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. Turn the engine off. Yeah, start again. So I don't know. I mean, it's cars are a weird thing. I love them and hate them, but mainly love them. And I'll probably get an electric car. But
you should think about your children and the environment.
Certainly here in Oslo, you need an electric car. Yeah.
So how much work have you made while you've been in lockdown in Oslo? Have you been quite productive?
Yeah, I mean, I've had lulls, and
Every time I phone you, you're on a bicycle. I can never get hold of you. You're on a bicycle somewhere.
Yeah, well, I cycle to the studio, which is I enjoy it.
I'm sure you're making this up.
No, I'm not making I mean, when you move to a city or when you're living in a city, the best way to get around is a bicycle because you start to understand the city a bit more. And if I go there in a car, I just go on a certain route. And actually with a bicycle, I've been roaming around the city and actually really enjoying it. And it's quicker than the car.
Anthony Gormley in London is, bikes everywhere.
Yeah.
And whizzes around everywhere. Every meeting he goes to, he takes his bicycle. And every time I see him set off, I'm always terrified I'm never going to see him again because he's whizzing around and the traffic in London's pretty intense.
Well, the traffic here is pretty... and here in Oslo, they have bicycle lanes and the motorists stop if they see you coming. So they're actually very polite.
Much more civilized.
It's much more civilized. But no, the work in the studio, I make a lot of work. Not all that work will come out. And it's what I do. So going to the studio every day, sometimes I don't do anything. Sometimes I just, muck around or leave the studio. And I've had one or two lulls. I think it's quite odd this time. Initially felt I just had to work. Felt I just had to
a lot of people
just
felt
keep on
they should
going.
throw themselves into
And then, 2 or 3 weeks into it, you slow down and, I took it easy for a while. And I don't feel stressed at all. And that's the interesting thing about lockdown or the various stages.
That's about the last thing I expected anybody in this moment to hear from anybody in this moment. But I think artists, as we've talked about a lot, are supremely equipped for this moment because being alone in the studio.
You're alone with your thoughts and your memories all the time. So it's in that respect, it's okay. As I said, I miss my assistants, but it's I've actually quite enjoyed it. I've kind of maybe learned a bit more about myself over this time because life has been fairly hectic for many years.
Yeah,
and it's actually nice just slowing down, pausing, thinking about things, reflecting on how we will all move forward and how I'll move forward and how life changes. So it's
a lot of people have been talking about that, and I think that it is really, really an important moment. I mean, for many, many reasons, and that we need to use it to reflect and to figure out how to come back out of this moment and what we're coming back to, and also how it's going to change us all. So it's a good thing.
I mean, I think there'll be many changes, and I think as I say, if the art world kind of gets itself together and people will want, I mean, this is my great hope, and I'm not saying it should happen, but I think people will want beauty, they will want art, they will want something solid. And
they very much
kind of hope that it doesn't go back to art fair after art fair. It comes back to actually looking and spending time.
They very much do at the moment. They very much crave that, and it feels very much like the moment after 9/11, actually, when people were in their homes with their families and want to be surrounded by beautiful things. But there is a significant difference this time around. I think people, the pause that's been demanded of us all, that's a good sound. The pause that's the pause that's been demanded of us all, I think has induced a sort of level of introspection and self-reflection that's quite different this time. And hopefully it will affect things as we move forward in a more positive way.
I think it's done it in many ways, hopefully politically, and hopefully that as countries and as people we move forward, but also individually. And I think individually, for me, it's changed quite a bit. It's
well, on that note, and as you've just opened your bottle and refilled your tea mug,
it doesn't look like it, does
it? We didn't see what you put in there, but we can guess. It's a very
nice dull whinny.
Ah, there you are. Another potential sponsor. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm good at that.
It's really lovely to check in with you and know what you've been up to and see you look awfully well and healthy, I must say.
Please give the family my love, but all the staff at the gallery, and thank them for everything. And,
yeah, I will. Thank you.
And you know, I know it's very hard for all of us, but it's hard for the staff as well. You know, all working remotely, and you know, I look forward to visiting you again in New York.
Yeah, we all look forward to visiting with each other as soon as possible.
When Donald leaves this world.
Well, we hope it'll be before that, but that can't come soon enough.
It will come soon. It will come soon.
Anyway, lovely to see you, and thanks for doing it. It's really fun to chat with you.
Take care.
And the Gullwing Mercedes 180 is on its way.
Thank you. Is that with Amazon?
Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime.
Through China. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.